The Owl House has a lot of great things going for it, like the plot, the animation, the morals of the story, and so on. But what I find most interesting about the show are its characters, especially the villains, and the biggest villain of them all is Emperor Belos, aka Philip Wittebane. What makes Belos such a fascinating character to me is just how he went from being an orphan child in 1600s New England to becoming a genocidal maniac with no hope for redemption. So how did Belos go from that to this? What is Belos' story? Belos' story begins in the 1600s when he was known as Philip Wittebane. Philip was an orphan child along with his older brother, Caleb Wittebane. The brothers Wittebane arrived in Gracefield, Connecticut in 1613. Being orphans, the two brothers only had each other to depend on. But even so, the brothers wanted to fit in with the crowd, and soon they became witch hunters. Side note here, this is actually very close to real history. I'm not just referring to the Salem witch trials in 1692, most people who learn US history have heard of this before, but between 1647 and 1663, decades before the Salem witch trials, Connecticut had a witch hysteria of their own where colonists did go around hunting for people who are accused of being witches. 9 men and 2 women were executed for witchcraft during this time. To be clear, I'm not surprised the show took cues from real history. I just thought it was cool as a history nerd. Anyways, during this time, Caleb met a real witch called Evelyn, who travels between the Boiling Isles and the human realm with Titan's blood. While not outright confirmed, Evelyn is extremely likely to be the ancestor of Edelyn Clawthorne. Besides the similar naming structure of the Clawthorns, Evelyn, Edelyn, Gwendolyn, Lilith. Okay, that one doesn't work, but my point still stands. There is more evidence to suggest that Evelyn is a Clawthorne ancestor. With the few glimpses of Evelyn we have seen so far, she shares similar looks to Ida and Gwen. But most significantly, Ida's portal door and the portal Belos, Luz, and her group went through to get back to the Boiling Isles were found near the home of Ida's family. We'll talk more about the Clawthorns and their relations with the Wittebanes, but that's for another time. Moving on, Caleb and Evelyn grew fond of each other over the years, and using a hidden supply of Titan blood, the two were able to travel between the realms to see each other. As a result, Caleb outgrew his witch-hunting ways and saw how barbaric it was. But his younger brother was so entrenched with that witch-hunting culture that he was convinced that his brother needed to be saved from the witches. Also, he is probably jealous that his older brother got a girlfriend before him, but Belos refuses to admit that. So Philip travels to the demon realm with his brother in order to free him from his attachment with Evelyn. How did he do that exactly? By fighting against his brother like hell and stabbing in the back, ultimately killing him. Now that I think about it, Philip isn't the only Disney cartoon antagonist to literally stab someone in the back and blame them for getting the fatality.
Now look what you've made me do.
After killing his brother, Philip likely lost his way to get back to the human realm. He was able to build the portal door of his own, but he lost it over the years, probably because of Evelyn. Stuck in the demon realm, Philip goes on to try and find a way to eradicate all the witches in the Boiling Isles in order to finish his lifelong work as a witch hunter. To achieve this goal, he sought help from the Collector, who themselves has a long and complicated history, which is a story for another time. He managed to get a hold of them thanks to Luz traveling back in time, not knowing who Philip really is. With the help of the Collector and consuming the souls of Talisman, Philip was able to learn magic that is much stronger than what any witch can yield. He goes around the Boiling Isles, spreading the message about the dangers of wild magic and getting the locals' attention by claiming he can speak to the Titan. It was also during this time where he changed his name to Belos because as Philip, he was run off from too many towns. Of course, his claims are pretty much bullshit, but Belos is good with faking his way to prominence. Throughout the centuries, Belos also tried to reincarnate his dead brother by creating clones of him called Grimwalkers. Belos wants these Grimwalkers to become a better version of his brother, and by better, I mean just having intense loyalty to him. He makes these clones of his brother his golden guard, or his right-hand man, who assists him with everything he needs. However, after a certain amount of time, Belos' Grimwalkers grew to resent him, and he destroys them every time they turn on him. We don't know just how many Grimwalkers Belos has killed off, but it's definitely a really high number.
Oh, shut up.
Meanwhile, as Belos goes around the Boiling Isles, warning people about wild magic, he develops the Coven system, where witches are given Coven sigils, and these sigils would limit what kind of magic the witch can practice. They also serve the purpose of significantly weakening the witches by draining their magic, but more on that later. All this work eventually culminated into Belos uniting the entire Boiling Isles under his rule as emperor around 50 years prior to the start of the show's main story. Throughout the next 50 years, Belos continued to enforce his rules of conformity, eliminating any wild witches or witches who practice multiple kinds of magic and refuse to join a coven, like Ada Cloudthorn. That brings us to Luz and her confrontation against Belos at the end of Season 1, in which it ends with Belos actually letting Luz go to save her found family, and he gets the portal door in exchange. Well, at least parts of it, because Luz did destroy it. Not to be deterred though, Belos rebuilt the door and continued onward with his plans for the Day of Unity. Throughout Season 2, we learn more and more about what the Day of Unity entails, and in historical terms, this was basically Belos' final solution to his witch hunting. When the day finally came, his plan was set in motion and he nearly succeeded in completing his goal, but then this happened.
Say, you wanna play tag? I'm it.
Within less than a second, Belos has lost pretty much everything, including his own form of a body. Despite being reduced to almost nothing though, he just refuses to die. Over the next several months, he possesses and consumes whatever life forms he can get a hold of and finds his way back to the demon realm to finish his work as a witch hunter. That brings us to the most recent episode of The Owl House, where Belos, despite all the crap he has taken, still blames his brother for his own wrongdoings, which just shows how petty he is and how too far gone he is. But even more miraculously, he managed to make it to the Collector before Luz and her group, and despite betraying the Collector before, he somehow tricks them into trusting him again. As of the current point in the series we're at now, Belos has managed to control the Collector and get them to turn against Luz and her friends. All of a sudden, Belos is once again on track to achieve his goal to wipe out all witches. I'm not gonna lie, reciting all the major points of Belos' story reinforces why he's such a fascinating villain for this show. Belos is pretty much a metaphor for all of humanity's worst acts in history. He learned and embraced a barbaric ideology of committing genocide against people who he believes are less than human. He killed his own brother when he refuses to accept his barbaric ideas. He created a system of magic education tracks, covens, and enforcement of the system, all in part of facilitating his genocide. Belos is pretty much like most mass murderers we learn in history. They believe in a destructive ideology so much and uses political power to implement it. He is very much the exact opposite of Luz. Belos represents the worst of humanity, while Luz represents the best of humanity. That's something I would like to explain in further detail, but that's for another day. So yeah, that is the story of Emperor Belos / Philip Wittebane so far. How do you guys think his story will end? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content like this. Also, thank you to the people who support me through YouTube memberships, along with everyone else who watches these videos. Anyways, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I hope you all have a great day. See you in the next one.